Hey, good afternoon. Happy November to you guys. It is Monday, November 1st. I'm Gabe DeArmond. We'll talk to Mitchell Forty in a minute. This is the weekend recap brought to you by True Sun Exteriors and Interiors every single Monday. And it has maybe not been a football season to remember thus far, but everyone is still soldiering on, and True Sun Exteriors and Interiors is your place to look if you need anything done around your house. It doesn't have to be a major project. If you have major projects, that's great. They can redo your rooms. They can build an entire addition to your house. They can do all sorts of things, but they can also do just minor jobs for you that, let's be honest, maybe you're too lazy to do. It's kind of cold. Maybe you don't want to do stuff outside to the outside of your house. So True Sun Exteriors and Interiors voted the best in home remodeling in Columbia by Inside Columbia Magazine in 2021. You can get a hold of them at 573-442-7292 or on the internet at truesunexterior.com. They are big Mizzou fans, great local business, and we would certainly encourage you guys to support them as we encourage you to support all of our sponsors. Rebuilding projects certainly front and center all season long here on this show. And welcome to the weekend recap, the show that's never been a 37.5-point underdog to anything on Monday afternoon. So we'll talk about Georgia and Missouri eventually, I guess, maybe this week, Mitch, but I don't think I can do it quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is the weekend recap. We got to at least talk a little bit about Mizzou's game against Vanderbilt, even though I think we were both fairly disgusted that we had to watch that instead of some of the other college football that was on Saturday.
I'm not saying this happened, but if you accused me of focusing more on the end of Michigan State than the first quarter of Missouri Vanderbilt, I also would not tell you that you're 100% wrong in that. So.
It was not aesthetically pleasing. Mizzou did win, which is good. I mean, better than the alternative. Yes. First SEC win, which is good. Better than the alternative. But it was another win in what seems like a long lineup this season where no one even comes away feeling very good, I don't think.
Yeah, I was thinking, I answered some questions for our Georgia guys this morning, and it occurred to me, was this Missouri's best win? Like, is this the best team Missouri's beaten this year? I'm not even joking. Is this the best team Missouri's beaten?
I gotta think Central Michigan's better than Vanderbilt. I don't know. Vanderbilt's impossibly bad. Like they're rough. So I don't know. We were talking briefly before the show about the Sacred ratings and Vanderbilt being in the 150s. I feel like Central Michigan's probably better, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, and those are football rankings, not bad. When I initially heard that, I assumed it was basketball ratings. That is not correct. I mean, Central Michigan's I think they're 4-4. They're 500-ish, so okay. I guess that's okay. I still would agree that's Central Michigan is probably the best team Missouri has beaten, but I guess we've always said, you can have a pretty good season just by beating bad teams and beating the teams you're supposed to. Well, that's not really the case for Missouri, because if they just beat bad teams, they're going to be 5-7. That's all they have to do is beat bad teams. You can beat one mediocre team and make a bowl game.
Right. Yeah, and I think the best chance to do that would have been, Arkansas is nothing incredibly special, but coming in, we kind of thought, if they could beat bad teams and get to 6-6, because we thought Tennessee was going to be a little worse than they are, and obviously thought Mizzou would, not absolutely lay an egg in that game.
Right.
But I don't know. It's just like you said in your 10 thoughts this morning. There's just not really a whole lot to get fired up about other than the recruiting.
And that's the thing. I really don't think most Missouri fans were asking for too much this year. I think everybody would have been happy with 8-4. I think even most people would have been satisfied with 7-5 and signs of progress. And just, I know partly it's the Tennessee game still kind of just really kind of darkening the way we talk about everything that's happened since then, but I think as a fan, all you want to do is feel like you're part of it, right? Feel like you're part of this sport. College football Saturdays, or last Saturday was actually still really fun. I mean, Michigan State was a great game. Georgia, Florida wasn't a great game, but it's a big deal. Ohio State, Penn State was pretty good. You know, there was all this stuff to watch all over the country. And when you're following a team like Missouri is, especially when they play a Vanderbilt, but truthfully, even some of the other times this season, it just kind of feels like you're not really a part of the whole thing. And that's not fun.
Yeah, I agree. And also when, we're talking about a season where, the wins have come over, two group of 5 teams, an FCS team and Vanderbilt, which, is as bad as any of them. And none of them was Mizzou really like, I mean, they dominated SEMO, but that doesn't really count. But talking about the 3 wins over FBS teams, like that, they weren't really, I mean, like those games were somewhat in doubt at various points in time. North Texas wasn't really, they were up 41-17, but they did get both in, I think like 10 points or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's like, you can't even say like, okay, well, at least we're like a whole lot better than that team. We really, played a full 4-quarter game and blew them off. It was like after every win, I really think the tenor of our message board, which again isn't maybe the best way to judge these things, but it's what we have, was more negative than positive.
Well, but that's how I felt after North Texas and Vanderbilt. Not so much Central Michigan because it was game 1 and I thought Central Michigan would be better than they are and whatever. But especially after this one, I mean, I fully believe and maybe you can explain to me what in God's name Vanderbilt was doing on the final play of the first half. I refuse to call it a Hail Mary because, like, there was nothing Hail Mary-ish about it. It was just like, oh, hey, Kiki Chisholm's wide open. I'm going to throw him the ball from 45 yards away. Like, it was just like this routine touchdown you see all the time against bad teams. But I truly believe without that play, Missouri loses to Vanderbilt. And that's horrifying.
Yeah, it's very possible. Yeah, the defensive strategy there. Clark Lee is supposed to be a defensive guy. First of all, only rushing 2, like, I don't know. I get it. I think that I would actually, I've said this before, not on here, but like if I was playing, I would rush 4 against the Hail Mary, just because, like if the ball never gets to the end zone, right, like you're for sure not going to complete it. Whereas even if you have 10 guys back there, if the ball gets there, weird things can happen. The best way to assure it's not going to happen is if you make sure it doesn't get there. And I think I forget which game I was watching yesterday. Maybe it was the game last night between the who was it? The Cowboys and Vikings. Like Kirk Cousins got flushed out of the pocket. He couldn't even get the ball to the end zone. He just kind of threw it away. So, yeah, like I would do that. But also, then the defensive back just kind of stopped running. Kiki Chisholm got like 10 yards behind him, and he was trying to get back, and then Kiki Chisholm just kind of took it off his helmet. Nice, I mean, good catch for Chisholm. But, yeah, that was just pretty much incompetence.
It was like watching Dan Sorensen try to cover Dawson Knox. All of a sudden, just in the middle of the play, he's like, what if I just ran over toward the sideline and hung out here for a minute? How would that go? It was bizarre. I mean, I could not believe – I didn't realize it live, but then they showed the replay, and I'm like, well, I don't – it's literally the only thing you can't do there.
Right, yeah.
Speaking of the only thing that you can't do, and look, the main focus has been the quarterback stuff. And – clearly, I think it's still fair to say Connor Bazelak has gotten too much heat for the last 4 weeks, but the heat has been deserved to some of it. Not maybe to the extent it's been given, but I looked at, because I kind of had this theory on Saturday, like something broke in him with the overtime interception against Boston College, and so I looked at it. The numbers are stunning. Like he's gone from 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions to 3 and 6. He's completing the same percentage almost of his passes, but he's averaging 1.5 yards less per pass attempt. I think some of it's physical, but I think it would be good to start somebody else this week just because I think he's kind of broken confidence-wise.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. So my thing on Bazelak is I think that he got way too much heat for the Kentucky loss and probably even the Boston College loss, even though that last throw was bad. I mean, they don't have a chance to win without him in those games. And that started, this narrative of like, oh, I don't think he's the guy, whatever. And we pushed back on it at the time, but I think you have to be willing to, acknowledge, like, change your stance as more data is presented to us. And he's not been good enough in the past few weeks. I'm not saying he's not the guy definitively, because we've seen him be better than he has the past few weeks. But yeah, something's wrong. I mean, physical, mental, probably both. He does not look comfortable at all in the pocket. He certainly doesn't look comfortable moving with the ball in his hands at any point. He made some uncharacteristic mental mistakes. I mean, that interception was terrible.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, one thing you cannot do in the red zone, throwing off his back foot. The defensive back didn't even move. He just was he just literally stood right up there, and God, I just knocked over my microphone because I was demonstrating. But yeah, so I mean, it's just, and then the slide, obviously a yard short, snapping the ball too soon. So I agree. I kind of don't think he'll play this week unless it really was just like a super minor thing and he can be about the same physically as he was the past few weeks. The one thing I will say, you say, you don't want to throw a broken quarterback out there against Georgia. And
you don't want to throw a freshman either.
You also don't want to put a true freshman or two freshmen to get out there against that defense either, because they are nasty.
This is setting up like, and I'll credit Dave Matter with reminding me of this. This is setting up like 2019 when they went to Georgia and Kelly Bryant was like, he was kind of hurt, but he wasn't super hurt. And they were just like, Taylor Powell, go wear this one, man. And then Bazelak came in late. And I still remember just the overexcitement of Missouri fans because Bazelak came in and led like a 60-yard drive or something when that game was 27-0.
They got into the red zone for like the first time all
right.
day.
And
didn't even score.
Georgia clearly was not trying. And everybody said, I like this Bazelak guy. I think he's the guy. And
right.
I mean, ultimately, he did end up being the guy. But kind of back to this discussion, I think two things here. I think, yes, Connor Bazelak right now is not the guy for this team. He is not good enough at quarterback to make the rest of this team good enough to win games. I also don't really think that guy's on the team right now. Like, I think Bazelak's not the right guy to make them good, and I still think he's the best quarterback they have right now. That may not be true in March. It may not be true next August. It may not even be true in 3 weeks. But right now, I think it's true. And at the same time, I am fully on board now with the people that are going, I just at least prove that to me. At least let me see it. Let me see Brady Cook or Tyler Macon play. And then if I can see him fail with my own eyes, okay, maybe then you go back to Bazelak. But the backup's always the favorite because nobody has seen him fail yet, while we've seen Connor Bazelak fail. And I'm not saying you put him out there to let them fail. Maybe you put him out there and, hey, everything changes and people rally around him and you win a game you wouldn't otherwise win, right? Maybe if Brady Cook plays against South Carolina or Tyler Macon plays against South Carolina, you really find something and you carry that over into Florida or Arkansas. So I just think at this point, as much of a reactionary message board type thing as it is, I'm kind of with the people that go, I don't know, man, just try it because at least it's different.
I was on board with that for sure against A&M because that's how I felt like it was going. I felt like, you know what? I mean, they're not going to win this game. So maybe at least see what you got. See if you have something. See if you can get a spark and carry it over through the bye or something like that. Or even that, maybe ignite something in Bazelak too, to see someone else go out there and play well. So yeah, I agree. I think that, and I mean, like, I should also point out, we don't know what the deal is with Bazelak. We probably won't even find out more tomorrow.
We'll find out on Saturday.
If he doesn't play, I'm expecting we'll see both quarterbacks Saturday. So I think we'll get a chance to at least see them, granted in a terrible spot. Like, if they both play bad against Georgia, I'm not going to say neither of them is the guy or anything like that. That's, an impossible situation. But yeah, I think it would be, I can understand at least why people are saying, let me see what we got in the younger guys.
And Jared kind of articulated what I'm saying. You can't lose confidence as a quarterback. It's the only position where the lack of confidence makes the whole offense suffer. I don't know if it's the only one, but it's the only position where you can make a change and it can just, even sometimes against anything that makes sense, change your team, right? I mean, you're not making a switch at left guard and everybody's going, all right, here we go. We're ready. Everything's different. You can't even do that at running back. It's quarterbacks. It's just different than everything else. And I don't think and now I think Eli Drinkwitz actually has the perfect situation to do it.
Minus the opponent.
Well, right. But I'm just saying this isn't benching Connor Bazelak, regardless of what the injury situation actually is, because I think he's been hurt the last 3 weeks. Like, not to a point where he couldn't play. I'm not accusing Drinkwitz of putting out a guy that shouldn't be on the field. But I think he has thought, okay, Connor's 75% or whatever, but I think that's better than 100% of the guys that I have. Well, now you can easily just say, he's just not healthy enough to play. And you can play that other guy, whether it's whether it's health related or not, you say it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. I also think that, I don't know. I think that this whole thing, it has made some people more anxious to see the backups, which we just talked about, and I understand. But I also think it has made me worried a little bit. Like, oh man, I'm not sure Drinkwitz thinks either of these two. Like, I don't know how highly he thinks of Brady Cook or Tyler Macon, and they might just be a right now thing. Like, Tyler Macon might end up being a really good quarterback. Not many quarterbacks come in and are able to play right away at an SEC level. They just aren't as true freshmen. It's extremely
especially
rare.
One that didn't play last year.
Right. So it's not necessarily saying damning on him long term. But yeah, like I also think that I think it would be a little harder for what I'm trying to get at is it would be harder for Eli Drinkwitz to pull Connor Bazelak and then put out someone who's going to be way worse. And especially if he thinks like, oh yeah, our backups aren't as good. But when Connor Bazelak's injured, he can kind of, use that to make the change. If the next guy's worse, he can say, see, that's kind of why I was sticking with Bazelak.
Yeah. And so it'll be interesting to see. But I think regardless, unless somebody just lights the world on fire in the next 4 weeks, which I don't think we really anticipate, I think you go into spring football and then again into fall camp with hey, this is wide open. And I know every coach says it, although Drinkwitz didn't say it this year. He was very clear from the start. Bazelak's our guy.
Yep.
I think going into next fall camp, it is, hey, we got 27 days to figure out who the best quarterback for this team is, and I include Sam Horn in that. I would not rule out Sam Horn being the starting quarterback for Missouri next year.
Yeah, obviously he won't be here in the spring because he's playing baseball. But yeah, I agree. I think that's the right mindset to go about it with. This is an open competition. So I will say too, like I know that people as they get more and more a look at Bazelak are eager for it to turn around. But like these things can't. I mean, it's possible this is a blip. Like Kenny Pickett, had some rough years. I mean, I believe there was a point where they kind of said like we're going to have an open competition and see who emerges. And look, he's having a great season. So I'm not saying like at no point are we trying to say that him or either the backups like can't be the guy long term. But yeah, I think the way you have to go about it is like, all right, well from what we've seen so far, like we're just gonna open it up and see which of those 4 guys. And addressing a question that just got asked, probably not all 4 will still be there, but which of these guys emerges next season.
And look, it also wouldn't hurt to give him some more weapons in the passing game, to give him an offensive line that is, I wrote this morning, I think if you just go by position, I think where Missouri's biggest flaw is between them and the teams they want to be is the offensive line. I mean, the defense has been terrible this year, but I don't look at Missouri's defense just physically or in games and say, well, they can't possibly play with even mid-level SEC teams. I kind of see that out of the offensive line a lot of times, to be quite honest. And Mitch mentioned a comment that was made, and we do invite you guys. I'm going to go back and hit a couple of questions and comments. Please, if you're here with us live, we certainly appreciate that. Hit the like button, put the comments there. We are going to get to them. We always kind of just, BS for 15, 20 minutes about what we want to talk about, but then we spend the second half of the show certainly focused on more of your guys' comments. And Cam Cameron says, my biggest takeaway from this season is that Tyler Badie was criminally underused the past 3 years. And, I mean, I think if you go back to his true freshman year, that's not true. I remember we were at the Purdue game, Mitch, where game-winning drive, and Tyler Badie's the running back, and we're both going, hold on, what the hell? And he made a huge play on that drive, and it worked. So I think he was used the right amount that year. I think it's fair to say he was underutilized the last 2, no question.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's hard to second guess last year because Roundtree was so good, but man, yeah, I think we could have seen a little bit more Badie out there just because of what we're seeing from him now. I mean, he's been even more productive from a yards per carry standpoint, even though he's carrying than he was last year. Even though he's carrying an insane workload. He's touching the ball like 24.6 times a game or something like that. So yeah, no, I agree. I think it's fair to say that we should have seen more Tyler Badie before this year. That said, if we see too much more Tyler Badie before this year, who knows? Maybe he's not around this year.
Right.
He's a good player. He might have gone pro.
But let's talk about that for a minute. You said Roundtree was so good last year, and I think that was the feeling, right? All of last year. He had 209 carries for 972 yards. He averaged 4.6 a carry. I think he was great at what Missouri needed. He helped grind it out. if you needed 1 yard, he was usually going to get 2. If you needed 4, he was usually going to get 5. In the red zone, he was money. He had 14 touchdowns. 4.65 yards a carry is not special. He had 209 carries, and Tyler Badie had 49. And every single week, Eli Drinkwitz would tell us, yeah, I've really got to find a way to use Tyler more. I mean, it's like you tell your kids, yeah, hey, ask me in a couple hours. Maybe we'll go to the pumpkin patch. Well, ask me a couple hours later. And then you just end up with no pumpkins on Halloween, right? I mean, so I guess I'm wondering now, especially with Badie getting 99.2% of the carries or whatever it's been, does he get a little too locked in on his best guy to the detriment of developing other? And now, obviously, Tyler Badie was plenty developed. He's good this year, so who knows? Maybe B.J. Harris or Elijah Young or somebody breaks out next year and he's the guy. But has there been a balance that should have been struck that hasn't, or is that stupid because then you're taking the ball away from the only real guy on your offense?
Yeah, I think that's where it stems from. Is like Drinkwitz has a guy in Roundtree last year and Badie this year who he trusts, and he says, good things happen when we get this guy the ball, so let's get him the ball a lot. And I think this year I can't fault him for it. I know there's been a lot of talk about like, oh gosh, we need to play someone else, and maybe at times, like late in games that have been somewhat decided. But like this past weekend, I would not have given Tyler Badie a single less touch. I wrote at halftime, I would consider giving him the ball every play because he is by far the best thing going for this team. I mean, you don't risk, you eliminate the risk of, interception for the
and you
most
have
part.
to win.
It's handoff or a dump off, and you have to win that game. Last year, though, I mean, like at this point, I remember saying at the time, but now it's for sure. Like, I mean, the Tyler Badie needed the ball more. I think it's pretty much impossible to ask. Do I think that would result in them winning any more games? No, probably not. I mean,
because their losses were all by like 24
they got
points.
Blown out in all their losses. It probably doesn't really change that much. But yes, I do think that we can now say that he probably deserved to have the ball more.
And ultimately, we'll find out should somebody else have had the ball more by what we see next year, right? I mean, if B.J. Harris comes out and he's a 1,000-yard rusher next year, it might be kind of like, why you didn't save a few carries on Badie's legs? But we'll find that out when we find it out. Steph brings up what I think is a pretty interesting point. Wide receiver rotation thoughts after the Vandy game. Where were Lovett and Hester? I think we had J.J. Hester with like 15 snaps.
Yeah.
We had Dominic Lovett with 8. I texted you in the middle of the third quarter and said, hang on, is Dominic Lovett playing in this game? Like, I forgot he existed in that game.
Yeah, it was weird. So first of all, they really cut down the wide receiver rotation because of injury. And usually they substitute those guys like crazy. And basically what happened is Kiki Chisholm played every snap, I believe. Towski Dove played all but
like
the snaps,
6 or something.
And Barrett Bannister, pretty much every time they had a third receiver on the field, Barrett Bannister was out there. Obviously they had sometimes with 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. But, and then when they went 4 wide, it seemed to be Hester, and Dominic Lovett only played 7 snaps. So it was weird, and I definitely think something to ask Eli Drinkwitz tomorrow, just like, hey, is Dominic Lovett healthy? What's kind of the deal with that? But yeah, a little bit strange there for sure.
And it brings up kind of a larger point that we talked about a little bit. I mean, we're 8 games in. If the recruiting is as good as it was supposed to have been last year, and now Dominic Lovett's played a lot this year, so maybe that's unfair, but like in game 8, should Towski Dove, Barrett Bannister, and Kiki Chisholm be getting 90% of the snaps if the youth on this team is supposed to be that good?
Right. I think just the weird thing is like, okay, why did it go backwards with Lovett? A guy who we've seen be pretty good when he touches the ball. I mean, I think, was it the A&M game this past game, or maybe it was 2 games ago against North Texas when he scored? He had several,
North Texas.
He had several nice plays. So yeah, I mean, like I kind of, the simplest explanation in my mind would be that it's a physical thing because, he's had a pretty consistent workload and he's done pretty good things. So it doesn't really make sense to completely freeze him out of the game plan, but who knows?
Well, and J.J. Hester, like they took the one deep shot and it wasn't a perfect pass. It could have been caught. I don't know, but
I actually thought that was a bad throw because when you saw
it was a little bit.
If he had led him to the right side more, he could have actually run under it and I think run away from the defender. It wasn't an atrocious throw, but I thought it was not a good throw.
Wasn't a horrible pass. Wasn't a horrible effort on the receiver's part. Both could have done a little more to make it work. But then I don't think he was targeted again. The one that still remains weird to me is Why would Boo Smith come back next year?
Yeah.
To return punts?
I'm actually not sure that he was. I don't know.
I saw him come off the sideline after Tyler Macon's touchdown. He was there.
Okay. All right. He wasn't on the injury report, but he wasn't in practice from what I saw when we were there on Tuesday. So I was wondering, was he back there to return punts? Maybe he was.
I don't know if he returned punts, but I do know that. I watched the replay of Tyler Macon's touchdown, and Dominic Lovett and Boo Smith were the first guys off the sideline to hug Macon after that play.
Gotcha. Okay, well then, yeah, I take it back. He was clearly there and healthy, and maybe I wasn't at this game, so I didn't have as good a grasp on the personnel. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I find it weird that he didn't play at all. Like we've said, I mean, good things happen typically when he touches the ball, so at least give him a few looks.
And he's played it's like 25 or 30 snaps all year. I mean,
right.
It's just they basically, when they put him out there, it's a dead giveaway. Hey, we're going to throw him the ball. We're just not going to put him out there very much. So, yeah, I find that interesting. I don't know. Snoop points out that it's not like Mizzou has a history of beating top teams. I don't know that anything we've said on this show would indicate that we believe they do. But I guess that's more toward this weekend that Mizzou is probably not going to win, which – I think that's a fair assessment, right? We both probably agree with that.
Yeah, I would say that the odds are. I feel pretty good about the fact that Mizzou will not win.
Yeah. So
I feel like we need to start making a bigger deal out of the non-covering streak. I mean, 11 straight games we don't cover is truly incredible. I'm fairly convinced Eli Drinkwitz is betting against his own team.
Well, we're joking, guys. We got to say we're joking here. We don't really believe that, but it's tough to do because, I mean, Vegas doesn't set lines where they're like, okay, we know how this one's going to go, so let's just set it a little higher. So, no, because then they would lose money, right? I mean, right. Vegas is, like I always say, they don't build those big buildings by being wrong. They have been wrong every single week against this team. It's crazy.
I mean, it's more or less like flipping a coin and having it come up on one side 11 straight times, which, by the way, Mizzou has also lost the coin toss in every game.
Have they really?
I don't know if it's every game, but it's a lot. I kind of want to go back and look because I'm just curious. I thought about it the other day because that's why they're always in the position where the other team's getting the ball first to start the second half, and Drinkwitz is worried about it because the other team wins into first every game.
Well, I think they should actually intentionally lose the coin toss every week because if they win the coin toss, then they have to decide to either go against, common wisdom and put their offense out first and take the ball, or they have to make the choice to put their defense out there first. And that's not really somewhere I'd want to be going.
Yeah, that's true. The defense started off okay on Saturday until Connor Bazelak threw that interception, and then everything just melted for about 2 quarters.
Well, and that was like, we talked about this I don't get it. Like, it was like one play happened, and the comparison I made was like Kim Anderson's team would be up 8, and the other team would hit a 3, and you'd go, oh, well, here comes the run, right? And it wasn't just like a 10-2 run. It was like a 27-6 run, and the game was over.
Yeah.
And, again, the game would have been over had they not been playing Vanderbilt, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
All right, Cam's other question here, and you mentioned it, but I think it's worth talking about. How many of Cook, Macon, and Bazelak are still at Mizzou next year? If I set the under at 1.5, do you take the over or the under?
I take the over. I think probably one of them leaves. I'd be surprised if 2 of them leave.
That's how I feel. I mean, and again, we're not trying to push anybody out the door, but it's the reality of the position, and they have Sam Horn coming in. We have said all along, of Cook, Bazelak, and Horn, 2 of those 3, Cook, Macon, and Horn, 2 of those 3 guys almost certainly will not end their career at Missouri. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, at some point, 2 of them are leaving.
I think that's fair. And I would also say, talking about the situation, I wouldn't be stunned if all of those guys come back for the spring and maybe even for the fall. But I think once the depth chart starts to crystallize a little bit, whoever's 4th is going to be like, I'm out of here.
And the interesting thing about Bazelak to me is, I mean, he is still technically a redshirt freshman, right? Now, he is draft eligible after this year. Nobody thinks Connor Bazelak is going pro. But let's say you get to the end of next year, and he is the starter next year, which I think he's the favorite. I don't think it's a given that he's the starter, but I think he's probably the favorite to be the starting quarterback next year. But you're at the end of year 4. with 2 years of eligibility left, like he all of a sudden becomes a kid who could grad transfer somewhere, and because I just kind of don't look at him and see, even in 2-3 years, like I don't really see NFL quarterback there. So, maybe he's a guy that maybe after year 4, he's like, hey, man, I appreciate everything's been good here. You've got some younger guys. I'm going to finish my career at a different place.
Yeah, no, that's very possible. Maybe he's just like, going to play football for a while and be like a doctor when it's all said and done.
That'd be cool.
Be in school forever.
Good for him. Good for him.
Yeah.
Jared points out, by the way, that Boo Smith did return punts at the game.
Okay.
Jeff says, what is Missouri going to do about the defense? It seems like they have more talent than they're performing. And, Jeff, I do not want to, come off as being snarky about this, but literally it's, I don't know, it's 8 weeks in a row that we're all asking. It's not just you. We've all asked that question. And the defense wasn't better on Saturday, okay? I mean, Vanderbilt ran for, what was it, 258. Okay. And I know people want to say, well, but there were 2 long runs in it. Well, yeah, but those count. I mean, they averaged 7 yards every time they ran the ball.
Right, and who's to say if they had only gotten 20 yards on those 2 runs, they wouldn't have continued to march down the field.
Exactly. And the actual distressing part to me, distressing is probably too strong of a word, but interesting, was, I mean, let's just be honest, man. Mike Wright can't throw. He's not a passer. He is not an SEC quarterback. With the weapons he has and the way he throws the football, he threw 3 touchdown passes. He wasn't great, but...
I mean, one of those, the first one was not a pass. It was, it was basically a handoff. It was a jet sweep where he just did the little toss. But still, yes, I get your point. Yeah. So, I know the defense was bad. I don't know.
And it's going to be bad the rest of the year.
Right. If there was something they could have done about it to fix it, I would hope they would have done it by now. So I don't see it getting dramatically better unless, I don't know, maybe one of these games down the stretch, the opponent will just inexplicably pass 60% of the time and throw 3 picks or something like that.
I mean, I don't think they do prop bets on college football games. What would the over-under be on Georgia rushing yards? 350?
Yeah, I was going to say somewhere in the low 300s.
Yeah,
probably.
Just because they would run out of time to run for more?
Right, they wouldn't run enough. I'm not sure they'll run enough plays. And it depends, maybe we were talking before the game, my favorite prop bet I came up with this game is who scores more points, the Mizzou offense or the Georgia defense. And if they get if they get a turnover and a short field or a defensive score, then that's even fewer plays their offense is running. So I would say somewhere around 300.
Here's another good prop bet. How many does Georgia hit double digits in pass attempts? I think maybe not.
I mean, no, probably because of so many passes. Football these days, so many passes are just extensions of the run game. You throw a little screen, a little slant, maybe I don't know, a shovel pass or something like that, and those count. I definitely think you would go under if you're talking about 10 attempts of 10 or more yards.
I mean, even on 3rd and 12, just run a draw play. It's going to work. We've seen it.
Yeah, we've seen that many times.
I would legitimately not throw a pass if I was Kirby Smart, and he seems to really hate throwing passes, so I think that's possible.
Yeah, he would probably be happy just handing the ball off every play and still winning by a lot of points.
All right, so Snoop kind of clarified what he meant. He says, even Mizzou's 10-win seasons, a lot came against Vandy-level competition. Some did, but, you can't win 8 games and only beat Vanderbilt and teams like that, right? To get to 8, it means you're winning games like Boston College and like Tennessee. The problem this year is not that Missouri isn't going to beat Georgia. The problem with this year is that the swing games they haven't won. And I think looking back, it's probably a little unfair to have called Kentucky and Lexington a swing game. That was a clear underdog game. But Tennessee was the definition of a swing game. So was BC, and those weren't close. And that's why instead of, 6-2, we're talking about 4-4.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, no, that's what we were saying. When you were saying like the dirty little secret of college football is you can be pretty good by beating bad teams. It's more so not beating great teams. Like
just beating average.
But you have to beat solid teams. I mean, you have to beat Tennessee, Florida in a year like this when they're a little down, or in the years when Mizzou won the SEC East and they were a little down. South Carolina, Kentucky, stuff like that.
But then the odd part is, okay, if we say Tennessee and BC are average teams, right? Well, if Missouri wins those games, Tennessee and BC are actually both sitting here 3-5, and all of a sudden we're saying they're bad teams, right? So you you kind of make them bad teams by beating them is the weird part. Yeah. But I don't know. If Missouri can find 4 more bad teams, they're going to end up 8-4 because they've beaten all the really bad teams this year. They just haven't beaten anybody.
I don't know that there's any teams quite as bad. I mean, even they will have to beat a better team than they've beat so far this season to win another game. I'm not saying I don't think they will. But South Carolina is a better team than any of the teams they beat this season.
Well, that should make you all feel better, right? That's a good place to end it. So, all right, Mitch, appreciate it, man. We'll catch up with you again on Wednesday. Well, I mean, I'll catch up with you before then, but the rest of these fine people won't. So. All right, Mitchell Forty, join us. Appreciate that, and want to also thank True Sun Exteriors and Interiors. They are our partners on this show every single week. True Sun is a local company which is looking to upgrade your new or existing home. Sometimes you need a professional to come see the space and make it work for you. The team over at True Sun was voted the best of Columbia 2021 when it comes to home remodeling. Their experienced team can do it all. It's not just a name, it's a passion. True Sun Exteriors and Interiors. Call them today at 573-442-7292. Get in touch with Barry and his team over there. You guys can commiserate a little bit about Mizzou football while the guys are over getting their work done. But if you take too much of their time doing that, probably take them a little longer to get their actual work done. So appreciate all you guys joining us. If you're watching here live, do me a favor before you log off, just hit the like button. If you are listening on the podcast, which I will post momentarily after this, leave us a nice review, leave us some nice comments, and spread the word about what we're doing here. We'll have Sean Williams tomorrow afternoon with me on the recruiting show. That's kind of, I think, the focus and where a lot of Missouri fans are looking this time of year. So we'll do the recruiting show tomorrow. Mitch will be back with me on Wednesday, and then at that point our attention turns a little bit to Mizzou, Georgia, and whatever that might be this weekend. So thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later on.